Today I'm here with Ross from Nutanix. We'll be discussing Nutanix and the New Zealand market and why resellers should be thinking about Nutanix as a product. Welcome, Ross. Thank you for coming along today.
Thanks, Lisa.
So first off, we'll just get you to tell us a little bit about Nutanix.
Our focus at Nutanix has always been to make data center infrastructure invisible, essentially. So that's what our founders set out to do about a decade ago now. And the way that they've done that is by looking at what the hyperscale cloud providers have in their data centers and saying that, okay, that public cloud experience isn't really necessarily the right thing for everybody. How do we bring that into people's data centers? So what we did there was basically write a whole lot of code to give us a software-defined data center that's super easy to manage, super easy to run, and super easy to operate, and also gives us the ability to flex out into public cloud so that we can provide full hybrid cloud and multi-cloud strategies for people.
How are you seeing the cloud market in New Zealand at the moment? Obviously, COVID has thrown a bit of a curveball into it, but what are you seeing from a Nutanix perspective?
It's been interesting. A lot of projects that were on the go have paused. A lot of people are starting to think cloud first strategies and looking more earnestly into that because they don't want to invest in infrastructure necessarily. And they see public cloud offerings as perhaps the panacea to their ills and taking a bit of fear and doubt out of what's happening in their own environments. But at the same time, we're seeing a lot of uptake in what we do because we provide a public cloud-like experience within their own data centers, so they don't necessarily have to push out to those offshore providers to get the same benefits that they're going to get from actually going public cloud.
And you can go across all public clouds?
Well, all the key ones, yeah. So we've got a really solid integration with the likes of AWS and Azure. AWS in particular at the moment, but then by the end of this year, Azure will be right at the forefront in parallel with them. And what we can do there is because of the way that our licensing is decoupled from the underlying hardware, we can actually just push out into those public clouds and just see them as an extension of the customer's on-premise data center, which is really good because you don't need to refactor applications and do a whole lot of the heavy lifting that is involved with getting into a public cloud and doing it properly, which is actually a lot harder than people necessarily consider.
Absolutely. So how does Nutanix see the landscape in New Zealand looking in the next few years in particular?
I think what we're going to see is mirroring a lot of what we're already seeing overseas. The public cloud market overseas is a lot more mature than here because they haven't had the same restrictions that we've had around things like data sovereignty and geographic distance from all the public cloud providers and things. So they're a lot more mature in that operational model over in the offshore markets like the US and Europe. Because they've been there first and been there before we were actually able to get there, they're also much more aware of the downfalls of that side of things as well. So what we're seeing now is a huge percentage of customers are actually declouding offshore, and we expect that to be the same trend here because of it, 85% of them have identified that a hybrid cloud model is the ideal operating model. So that's a horses for courses approach. Put some stuff in the public cloud which suits, like for example Office 365, perfect use case. And then have other things inside your own data center where you might not necessarily be able to push them up there, or for governance concerns or anything like that, not be actually able to push them up there.
So why would a partner look at Nutanix?
At the moment, the hyperconverged infrastructure, which is the market segment that we play in, is relatively fledgling in New Zealand. We've had some really good uptake and we're growing at an incredible rate. But there's only a handful of players who are really strong in that segment in New Zealand. So there's a really good point of difference that people can have if they want to go down the path of working with someone like Nutanix. And we've wrapped everything up with a really comprehensive partner program as well, which means it's very profitable for customers. And we're a very safe pair of hands. We've got a net promoter score of over 90 and have had for almost 6 years now. So our partners can go to their customers with complete confidence that what we're going to put forward with them is going to deliver on the promise and is going to delight their customers. So it's a really strong value proposition that we can go out there with.
And in terms of partner enablement training, if someone was interested in Nutanix, how would they go about that?
It's a really simple process. So myself and my channel systems engineer, Ron Furr, would actually just engage with them and set out a training program. The certifications are very achievable and very easy to actually structure a training program around. And we can help guide them through that whole process and then work with them on market generation, lead generation type activities and things to help them build a pipeline to actually make sure that they've actually invested in something that's going to deliver as opposed to just getting a certification for a tick box.
And you mentioned before around profitability. This is obviously a key point for a number of the resellers in the market at the moment in terms of keeping that profit as high as they possibly can. Talk me through a little bit more around how Nutanix can help with profitability. In particular, when you think about cloud, it's often an expensive exercise to move to the cloud. So yeah, talk me through that part.
Sure. So because we've got such a complete software stack, we're very much a land and expand type of an environment for people. So once we've actually set the foundations for modernising their data centre with the hyper-converged infrastructure piece, there's a lot more that can layer on top of that as they go. So they can get into a really consultative sort of an approach with people, and that depends on whether they want to be doing work from home type initiatives for virtual desktops, whether it's big data type stuff, database management, database as a service. Being able to do DR very, very easily, flexing out to those public clouds. There's a lot of consultancy involved in actually doing those sort of things. And then within our partner program itself, we've got some really attractive rebates for our partners. And we've also got a very good front-end margin profile with the deal registration process that we give, which is when active partners who are really working with us have a very, very strong advantage over anybody else who would come and show up later in the sales process.
When we're talking cloud and we're talking MS Pays and things, is there anything in particular that Nutanix can help do around MS Pay?
From a managed service provider perspective, because of the operational efficiencies that we bring to a data center, then we make massive savings for them on their own internal costs. We have one partner, for example, who's currently migrating everything onto the Nutanix stack off a really top-class 3-tier stack, because it reduces their operational time spent on the environment from 80 hours a month to 6. And that's a really typical experience for our customers. So for a managed service provider, because we can grow incrementally, they don't have to invest in monolithic large sort of SAN environments and things like that. They can get their billings in line with the actual growth, which is really good for the cash flow side of things. And we have a managed services provider model as well, which gives them the ability to have consumption-based pricing, which can get very, very granular down to the hour. So those are sort of key things for the managed service providers for us. And we've got a lot of uptake in that area globally as well.